In recent times, many countries are facing rapid collapse. These nations grapple with skyrocketing inflation and political instability, leaving citizens without basic services and resources like food and water. Years of mismanagement and corruption have destroyed their foundations, while external factors like conflict have pushed them to the brink of collapse. Like and subscribe, as we're diving into the top 10 fastest collapsing countries, where millions are struggling to survive amid chaos. 10. Syria. Once a vibrant Middle Eastern nation, now stands as a stark example of a country in rapid collapse. After more than a decade of devastating civil war, the country's infrastructure lies in ruins, with entire cities reduced to rubble. Imagine living in a place where finding safe drinking water is a daily challenge. The Syrian pound has plummeted in value, losing over 99% of its worth and leading to skyrocketing prices for basic goods. More than half of the pre-war population has been displaced, either internally or as refugees in neighboring countries, creating one of the largest humanitarian crises of our time. The economy is crippled by international sanctions, limiting trade and foreign investment. Oil fields, once a major source of revenue, are now largely under the control of various factions or foreign powers. Agriculture, traditionally a key sector, has been devastated by conflict and climate change, leading to widespread food insecurity. The healthcare system has been decimated, with many hospitals and clinics destroyed or non-functional, leaving millions without access to basic medical care. Education has been severely disrupted, creating a lost generation of Syrian youth who have known nothing but war. The ongoing conflict has left the country fragmented, with different regions controlled by various groups, making national recovery efforts nearly impossible. 9. Venezuela. Venezuela, once a prosperous oil-rich nation, now tops our list of fastest collapsing countries. The country's economy has been in freefall for years, with hyperinflation reaching mind-boggling levels. This economic nightmare has led to widespread poverty, with over 80% of Venezuelans struggling to make ends meet. The country's political landscape is equally chaotic, with disputed elections and accusations of authoritarianism. As a result, millions of Venezuelans have fled their homeland, creating one of the largest refugee crises in recent history. Basic services like electricity and water are unreliable, and hospitals lack essential supplies. The once thriving oil industry, which was the backbone of Venezuela's economy, has crumbled due to mismanagement and lack of investment. It's hard to believe that this country, which sits on the world's largest oil reserves, now struggles to produce even a fraction of its former output. The situation has become so dire that many Venezuelans are forced to scavenge for food in garbage dumps, while others resort to illegal mining just to survive. 8. Pakistan. Pakistan, a nuclear-armed nation of over 220 million people, is facing a perfect storm of crises. The country's economy is on life support, with inflation soaring and the value of the Pakistani rupee plummeting. Pakistan's debt burden has become unsustainable, consuming a huge chunk of the government's budget and leaving little for essential services. Political instability is rampant, with frequent changes in leadership and accusations of corruption at the highest levels. The country also faces ongoing security threats, including terrorism and regional conflicts. Climate change has hit Pakistan hard, with devastating floods in recent years displacing millions and causing billions in damages. The education system is struggling, leaving a large portion of the population illiterate and unprepared for the modern job market. Power outages are common, crippling businesses and making everyday life a challenge. With a rapidly growing population and dwindling resources, Pakistan's future looks increasingly uncertain. The country's position on this list is a stark reminder of how quickly a nation can unravel when faced with multiple, simultaneous crises. 7. Tunisia. Tunisia, once celebrated as the success story of the Arab Spring, is now sliding towards economic and political collapse. The country that sparked hope for democracy across the Middle East is grappling with a failing economy, political deadlock, and growing public discontent. Tunisia's tourism industry, a key economic pillar, has been battered by security concerns and global crises, leaving many without jobs. The country's young democracy is showing cracks, with power struggles between the president and parliament leading to political paralysis. Inflation is soaring, making everyday life a struggle for ordinary Tunisians. Basic goods are becoming unaffordable, and many are forced to choose between paying for food or medicine. The education system, once a source of national pride, is deteriorating, leaving young Tunisians ill-prepared for the job market. Water scarcity is becoming a critical issue, with climate change exacerbating the problem. Social unrest is on the rise, with frequent protests over economic conditions and political frustrations. The dream of a prosperous, democratic Tunisia seems to be slipping away, leaving many to wonder if the sacrifices of the revolution were in vain. 6. Myanmar. Myanmar, also known as Burma, is experiencing a rapid descent into chaos following a military coup in 2021. The country, which had been making strides towards democracy after decades of military rule, has been plunged back into authoritarianism and civil unrest. Imagine living in a place where expressing your political views could lead to imprisonment or worse. The economy has nosedived, with the value of the kyat, Myanmar's currency, plummeting and foreign investment fleeing. Many people have lost their jobs or seen their businesses collapse. The healthcare system, already weak, has been further strained by political turmoil and the pandemic. Education has been disrupted, with many schools closed due to safety concerns. The country is also facing multiple armed conflicts, with ethnic militias and pro-democracy groups fighting against the military government. This has led to a humanitarian crisis, with thousands displaced and struggling to access basic necessities. Internet blackouts are common, isolating people from information and each other. The international community has imposed sanctions, further isolating Myanmar's economy. Human rights abuses are rampant, with reports of arbitrary arrests, torture, and extrajudicial killings. Once seen as a country on the path to reform and openness, Myanmar now stands as a stark example of how quickly progress can be reversed. 5. Lebanon. Once known as the Paris of the Middle East, is now facing a catastrophic economic meltdown. The country's financial crisis, which began in 2019, has only worsened, pushing over 80% of the population into poverty. The Lebanese pound has lost more than 90% of its value, causing hyperinflation that has made basic necessities unaffordable for most. The banking system has essentially collapsed, with depositors unable to access their funds. Lebanon's political system, based on a delicate sectarian balance, is paralyzed, unable to implement necessary reforms. The devastating Beirut port explosion in 2020 further compounded the country's woes, destroying large parts of the capital and draining already scarce resources. Electricity is available for only a few hours a day, forcing businesses to close and hospitals to struggle. The healthcare system is on the brink of collapse, with shortages of medicines and medical supplies. Many educated Lebanese are fleeing the country, resulting in a brain drain that will have long-lasting effects. 4. Ghana. Often seen as a beacon of democracy in West Africa, is now facing its worst economic crisis in a generation. The country's economy, once praised for its rapid growth, is now buckling under the weight of massive debt and runaway inflation. Ghana's currency, the cedi, has been in freefall, making imports prohibitively expensive in a country that relies heavily on them. The government's attempts to secure international bailouts have come with harsh conditions, leading to cuts in public spending and increased taxes. This has sparked protests and social unrest, threatening the country's long-standing political stability. Ghana's natural resources, particularly gold, have become a double-edged sword. While they bring in revenue, illegal mining operations are causing severe environmental damage and health crises in many communities. The country's healthcare system is stretched thin, struggling to cope with both traditional diseases and the aftermath of the global pandemic. Youth unemployment is skyrocketing, leading to a brain drain as educated young Ghanaians seek opportunities abroad. The situation is so dire that even basic food items have become luxuries for many families, forcing difficult choices between eating and other essential needs. 3. South Sudan. South Sudan, the world's youngest nation, is grappling with a storm of crises that threaten its very existence. Since gaining independence in 2011, the country has been mired in civil war, ethnic violence, and economic collapse. The economy, heavily dependent on oil exports, has been crippled by conflict and fluctuating global oil prices. Hyperinflation has made the local currency nearly worthless, forcing many to resort to barter. Despite being rich in natural resources, South Sudan lacks basic infrastructure. Roads, electricity, and clean water are luxuries for most. The healthcare system is virtually non-existent, with one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world. Education has been severely disrupted, with many children growing up without any schooling. Ethnic tensions continue to simmer, leading to sporadic outbreaks of violence. Climate change is exacerbating the situation, with floods and droughts destroying crops and livelihoods. The country heavily relies on international aid, but humanitarian access is often restricted due to security concerns. 2. Sudan. Sudan, once Africa's largest country, is now teetering on the brink of collapse. The country has been in turmoil since a military coup in 2021 derailed its fragile transition to democracy. Imagine living in a place where violent clashes between rival military factions have turned cities into war zones. The economy is in freefall, with inflation soaring and the Sudanese pound losing value rapidly. Food insecurity is rampant, with millions facing acute hunger. The healthcare system, already weak, has been further strained by conflict and the exodus of medical professionals. Education has been severely disrupted, with schools closed or repurposed as shelters for displaced people. Sudan's vast agricultural potential remains largely untapped due to years of mismanagement and conflict. The country's strategic location has made it a battleground for regional powers, further complicating its path to stability. Environmental challenges, including desertification and water scarcity, threaten long-term sustainability. The ongoing conflict has led to a humanitarian crisis, with millions displaced internally or seeking refuge in neighboring countries. 1. Somalia. Somalia tops our list as the fastest collapsing country in the world right now. After decades of civil war, this Horn of Africa nation continues to face a perfect storm of crises. Chronic instability has left Somalia with a shattered economy, dysfunctional institutions, and a population living in constant fear. The terrorist group Al-Shabaab controls large swathes of territory, imposing its harsh interpretation of Islamic law. Piracy off the Somali coast, once a major international concern, has given way to illegal fishing and toxic waste dumping, further depleting the country's resources. Climate change has hit Somalia hard, with recurring droughts and floods devastating agriculture and livestock, the backbone of the rural economy. Food insecurity is rampant, with millions relying on international aid for survival. The healthcare system is virtually non-existent, leaving the population vulnerable to preventable diseases. Education is a luxury, with one of the world's lowest school enrollment rates. Clan-based politics continue to undermine efforts at national reconciliation. Despite some progress in recent years, Somalia's road to recovery remains long and fraught with challenges.